the way that I actually first got to know you was many, many years back when you used to work at the Basilica of Sainte Anne, which at the time was Sainte Anne. It wasn't yet a minor basilica, I believe. Mm-hmm. I believe you were a part of the process to help it become a basilica. What can you tell us about those years?
Yeah.
Besides all the trauma. No.
No. It's good. So that was really special. So I was approached because there was the Archbishop Vigneron had a kind of a dream to make Sainte Anne a minor basilica. Can I explain a little bit to the viewers? Right. Okay. So a question I would often get: what is a minor basilica? Okay, and this is and from all kinds of walks of life, and this is what I would say. Is imagine, if you can, to yourself, the closest park to your house, the closest park. And like, what value does that park have to the community? So maybe, kids go there to play, and people take their dogs there to walk them around, and, maybe people go and fly kites. So the closest park to your house has value in your community because it serves the local community. Now imagine the Grand Canyon, right? The Grand Canyon is considered a national park versus a local park. So the Grand Canyon, even though we would say like these local parks have value to the community for sure, we would say on a larger scale, something like the Grand Canyon has kind of like a sense of wonder to it that deserves a little bit of extra recognition. For our entire nation, right? And so that's kind of what a minor basilica is like. Any church, any local church, the church here, we're at Our Lady of Guadalupe, shout out, come to Mass, get your sacraments here. You heard it here.
Shout out to Father Beto.
Shout out to Father Beto. Our Lady of Guadalupe has value to the community, right? Because people are getting baptized here, they're getting married here, they're getting buried here, right? Like these important parts of their life. So it has a lot of value. But then something like Sainte Anne, we would say maybe deserves a little bit of extra recognition for a couple of, for different reasons. So that's how you would apply for a minor basilica. Sainte Anne, as you know, is the second oldest continuously operating Catholic church in the entire United States, which is wild to think about because...
I think most people in this area don't really even know that. Because even like most of my life, I used to go to Holy Redeemer and St. Gabriel. Yeah. And it wasn't until... my reversion that I started to go to Sainte Anne because of Jornadas. But at that time, I didn't even know that area of the city and now I'm like so used to it, but it's like,
Right. And even like, if I think about it, if you think about like the United States and Europeans coming from Europe, where are they going to land first? Freaking not Michigan, because we're so far inland, but Sainte Anne was established by the French in 1701. So that was 75, just a little bit of historic fact, 75 years before the United States was founded, Sainte Anne was founded. So that parish is 75 years older than our nation. I will say the parish building has gone through several iterations. And so the current building was built in 1886. But the recognition goes to the community within it, like this guy right here. That is just one of like this very important and significant historical legacy. So I wrote the application that was sent to the Pope, and that was a project. But it was a really beautiful and interesting one too, because I was able to like research and learn a lot about the community, of course, a lot about the history, and then also about the building itself.
When you were doing the research and all the paperwork, was there something that just kind of like drew your attention? Like, this sounds crazy.
This is the one that I really think, and I've never talked about this before. This is like kind of maybe it's not interesting to anyone else, but just for us, okay? The history, kind of the history of Sainte Anne is also the history of Catholicism. And I was just talking to a friend about this. He was like, how do you kind of see yourself in faith? And I was like, honestly, I kind of see myself, like the beautiful cathedrals in Europe, they would have taken, they say like 1,000 years to build. And so, or a couple hundred years at the very least, couple hundred years. And so basically the concept is that the guy at the beginning who made the plans will never see the end. And the guy at the end never knew the guy with the plans. but they all had to work together. And there's going to be like actually a couple of middle generations of workers who never know either. They never know the beginning guy, and they never know the end guy. They're just working. And in some ways, that's kind of how I always saw myself at Sainte Anne, because I was not one of the beginning guys. And it's not done. It has a lot to be done to it still, right? Like as the community continues to change and grow and minister. But I got to be one of the middle guys who worked with it. So I also did a lot of research about just like the early faithful through this area, right? Because so if like Detroit was established only 2 days before Sainte Anne was established as a city. So the city was established, and 2 days later, the church was established. And so as the church was growing and developing, the whole city was growing and developing. As then, we would say, 75 years later, our nation starts growing and developing. So I was also doing research on like what was going on with the faithful this whole time. And something that I thought was really interesting, well, like we owe so much to like these beautiful missionaries who just literally gave their lives for the faith that we get to know today. And one thing that I just think is interesting for me is kind of in this middle part, kind of in the same area as Father Gabriel Richard, is as maybe you know, the Native Americans had a high susceptibility to addiction to alcohol. And as you also might know, Catholics aren't teetotalers. We're not told that we can't drink alcohol, right? But the Native Americans were being abused by European settlers who would give them alcohol so they would become addicted quickly, fast, and like kind of violently. And then the European white settlers would use this to the white settlers' advantage. Okay, so they would kind of, in some ways, enslave Native Americans in a harmful addiction. And then enter priests and religious. And they didn't really understand, of course, addiction in that time. And basically, I was just like reading about these priests who were like, what do we do about this? Like, clearly there's something significant that's happening to this Native population, and we don't know the best way to handle it because we can't tell people to not drink alcohol because that's not really a part of our faith. But like at the same time, there seems to be like a different amount of like tolerance. So I don't think they ever found a good answer, but it was just really interesting to watch church leadership. And I think this is like a question that all of us have to deal with as Christians, which is, what does it mean to love? And how do we best love? And I'll tell you something that a friend of mine says, and that's the closer you get to Jesus, sometimes the grayer that becomes. Because like you just keep seeing more complicated and complex human problems, right? Like how do you love someone who has a different amount of susceptibility to an addiction? So I thought that was just really interesting. That was my personal one.
No, I love that because I don't know. I think I'm very, I wouldn't say big on, but I am very interested when it comes to spiritual warfare. And in my own life, I have seen a lot of things within the city, and I've always been curious if there's like a spirit that is afflicting the people within it. And as you speak of it, it does seem like the enemy, like in all places and all times, has affected its people. But the beautiful thing about it is the missionaries who come to try to say there are people that are in need of Jesus, and we want to try to help. So yeah, that I think that's beautiful. And I mean, to this day, if you look around the city, you see much of you could say the negative effects of that pain, of that addiction that continues, and with drug addictions and just so much. But I think the beautiful thing about our faith is that it's been there for over 2,000 years. And I think in terms of the city of Detroit, I don't know, maybe people who are so drawn to fighting for justice, within them is that heart of Jesus who wants to help.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, as you were talking about love and that gray line, I mean, people are complex. I'm a complex human being. Same. Like we have so many problems in our lives, and sometimes I think I could fall into the error of assuming just because I live in a home and I have a house and I have a job that I am all right. But sometimes examining my own mind, I'm just like, I'm a mess, Jesus. I am a mess, Jesus.
I was talking to this friend yesterday and he's like, I used to not get when people were like, man, I hope I make it to purgatory. And he's like, and now I'm like, I 100% get it. Cause it's just like the more you learn. But okay, so here's the second one. And this one's like kind of a word. Okay. So like 2 weeks ago ish, I can't remember. Maybe it was 3. My memory is like worthless. Okay. As far as like short term like that. A friend texted me on Monday and she said, will you give a talk to our staff? And I was like, yeah, what day? And she said Thursday. So like 2 days from them. And I was like, yeah, okay. I was like, what's the theme? And she said, the theme is hope. I was like, okay. So I would wake up early every morning, stay up late every night, read about hope. Okay. And there was a man in the 1980s and he was a researcher, not faith-based, just like, and he found 3 characteristics of hope-filled people. Do you want to hear them?
Go right ahead.
Number 1, hope-filled people have like a goal in the future. They're looking to the future and they believe like with something good in mind. And that can be big or small. So a hope-filled person could be like, next year, I want to run a marathon. That's like a year from now goal. Or a hope-filled person could be like, hey, in 2 weeks from now, why don't we go and get ice cream together? Both of those would count. Second thing of a hope-filled person is that they recognize their own agency, it would be called, which is to say they recognize where they can impact and influence change. So they say like, maybe everything's not right, but like I have a decision still. I have a decision in how I respond, how I react, how I act, how I think, everything that's within my power. Third mark of a hope-filled person is that they can imagine a variety of pathways to goal. So let's say we set a plan to 2 weeks from now eat ice cream and then it rained that day. So like ice cream. We could just be like, oh, well, why don't we just go out for kombucha? Because the goal is like the gather in the community, right? So we create another pathway. Does that make sense? Father Gabriel Richard, this is the for everyone thing, I think was the master of the pathway because there were so many things that he wanted that he never saw actualized. But then you kind of realize that the final thing he wanted was heaven. So he left France in secret. Did you know that? Because of the French Revolution. It said he left narrowly with his life. Within, I think, a year of him leaving, 200 priests in his area were killed. And he always wanted to go back to France. But after the city burned down, he had a plan to go back to France, but Michigan was named like a territory or something, so there was going to be a big party in Detroit, and he stayed for the party. And a few days later, Detroit burned to the ground.
Conspiracies.
So he never returned to France. He always stayed in Detroit. And he had other plans besides that. And he accomplished a lot in his life. But there was another time he meant to go, I think, to Green Bay, but or up north or somewhere else. And the bishop, whoever his superior was, didn't give him permission. So again, he returned to Detroit. So there were like these constant situations where he wanted something else than is what he was given. But he still like persevered and wrote the motto to the city. We hope is the motto. We hope for better things. That's that eye on the future.
We hope she will rise from the thing. Well, we hope for better things. She will rise from the ashes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Which I think that's always been since I was in high school. Hearing that phrase, it just always sounds incredible. It just when we are in desolation, when we break down, we are destroyed. There's always hope to come back up.
Yeah.
And well, our hope is in Christ, and so yeah, that's awesome.